Okay, I want you all to think through this particular thought. You brought it up earlier, Kelly. There are a group of Northwestern football players who are angry about what's happened.
Yeah.
If indeed absolutely nothing has gone on the way it's been reported, knowing me, if I were a Northwestern football player, and I realize this is a real stretch, but let's just say that George Plaster is a defensive back at Northwestern, and I know full well that anything resembling this has gone on, and my coach got fired, whether I had the university's permission or not, I would have emailed a bunch of those Chicago writers and said, my name is so-and-so. I'm a starting defensive back at Northwestern. I will be holding a press conference today at the Sheraton Elliston in wherever Northwestern, Evanston.
Yeah, it's up in Evanston.
And I will answer any and all questions. And by the time I am finished, all of you will know that nothing ever happened. So if they're not guilty of this stuff, why isn't anybody doing that? Think about it.
That's a really good question, George. It's hard to get out on that ledge by yourself. But what you're saying is, if none of this happened, then why is it so hard to do? It's always better to go as a group, you know that. And I don't know if I would have ever. I can remember a little bit of something happening like that with one of the teams that I played for, and if the guys had gone about it the right way, they had a case. They had a case, but didn't know how to go about it. I don't know, George. I don't know how to answer that question. That's a good question, because if you haven't done anything, you should be willing to go out and stand on that ledge by yourself and go say, hey, I'm sticking up for Pat Fitzgerald. But if you know that there's bones in the closet and they're buried outside, you're just not going to do that. And it's hard to come out and go against, because the media and social media is so crazy nowadays, and you say something that can be taken out of context. I don't know. That's a really good question, George, and I'm not sure. I don't really know how to answer that. Maybe Billy's got a better answer than I do, but I just know that me being a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid, that if something like this had gone on and happened, and I thought that stuff wasn't happening, I still don't know if I would have gone out by myself and called up WSMV out of Nashville, or called up Fox out of Nashville and said, hey, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to protect my coach. As a young kid, I just don't know if I would have done that, George. Even though I know that he was right and none of this stuff went on, I just don't know. And the guys that are talking about this are underclassmen. So I just don't know, as a guy, I could have done that.
Well, what I'm trying to do right now is put myself in the shoes of a Northwestern player. Probably, an older player would have to do this. Would have to lead the charge with this.
You would hope, yeah. Senior leaders.
Right, senior leader.
Co-captain, yeah. Whatever.
So say you got a senior, right. He was on a really good Northwestern team his freshman or sophomore year, but the last 2 years have been brutal for Northwestern. They haven't done a lot of winning. And just the timing of a lot of it, they might not, that senior might not feel like he has the ground to stand on because of how bad the program has been. Now, if
screw that. Listen, this shouldn't have anything to do with wins and losses.
I'm saying if Northwestern was coming off a Big Ten title,
they probably would have washed it under and nobody would have found out anything.
Exactly.
But that should not be the issue here. All I'm saying is this. If my head coach got blown out last night and I knew full well that none of this ever happened, there is no question on my end that today I would be openly talking to as many media as I could to say, listen, I have no reason to lie. By the way, I'm on academic probation with an 0.8. that might get brought up. What kind of grades do you have? Not very good. But the point is, if my coach got blown away, and I know for a fact that none of this has happened, you're damn right I'd be talking.
Well, and they might be doing that right now. We don't know.
Well, hold on a second. You can go to all these different sites. Heck, even I know how to do it. Do you see one that's saying anybody's saying anything?
No, but I mean, they could be building something quietly and maybe waiting on, waiting
on what? Waiting on
something.
Santa Claus to arrive? I mean, now's the time. Your coach has gotten blown away.
What's the reward for that, though? If you
doing the right thing. If this truly has not happened,
that's
what's
the
been
caveat
reported
we're going off
has
of.
not happened. Your coach has gotten blown away wrongfully, and nobody's willing to stand up and say it. I'm just saying the fact that everybody's being kind of quiet tells
that
me
says a
that
lot.
it really does. Now,
Yeah.
Let's put Derek Gregg's picture up there for a minute. Derek Gregg is a former Vanderbilt receiver who played under Coach Watson Brown. I've checked with several people today who have told me if Gregg had known any of this, he never would have tolerated it. If you look through his background, a lot of it with the NCAA is inclusion. That's the theme of Derek Gregg. Now, that said, the players were pissed off last night that he was nowhere to be found, and it was reported on ESPN that he was on vacation. Well, I don't care if you had to ride on a camel as opposed to a 747. If you're out of town, out of the country, out of wherever, and your president is conducting an investigation that we all knew by Friday was happening, my butt would be back at Northwestern. This, in my opinion, is a major Derek Gregg screw up. Kelly, I don't know any other way to say that.
I'm with you, George. There's sometimes in life where I understand he might not have had a vacation for forever, and he might be with his family and his kids, but this is kind of bigger than that, and that's kind of what your job description is. And it kind of seems like when you're allowing that to happen and you're allowing the president to run the investigation, I mean, are you hiding from that? That's I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. Are you running away from that because you've heard rumblings of that and you didn't do anything, so you're out? I'm not trying to speculate. I'm just saying I'm with you. If he was gone and all this stuff is happening, you have got to get your tail back to Northwestern and you have got to find out what's going on. You got to start talking to people. You got to start talking to coaches. You got to start talking to some of the students, and you got to figure out what's going on, because that's just that makes it feel like, to me, that you kind of knew what was going on and you're hiding from the stuff that is coming down the pipe. That's kind of what it is to me. Now, that's total speculation on me. I don't know anything about that. I'm just saying, with something that's happened like this, that is such a media catcher, as this hazing scandal going on at Northwestern, and you're the head of the athletic department at Northwestern, you certainly need to be back in Evanston.
Now, let's take an issue that probably is more interesting to me than it might be to listeners. But the stuff that got Pat Fitzgerald fired came out of a student newspaper. And just down the road, within a stone's throw of the Northwestern campus, is a very active Chicago media. And this very active Chicago sports media, Chicago news media, whatever, got hammered by a student newspaper that had all the stuff. Now, my gut feeling is the student paper had this stuff and held it probably not to make the president look really good, because the minute he came out with his 2-week slap, they came with this, gut-wrenching story, and boom, here's the explosion. My guess is that sports editors of papers like the Tribune and the Sun-Times have reamed out their sports people and said, how can you let a group of students kick your butt? Look for the Chicago papers in the next day or two to come with round 2 of this bombshell, because they are looking to make up for lost ground that a student newspaper killed them.
Well, and they're able to do that. Maybe they're thinking the other way, thanking the students in a way of saying, "Hey, thank you for throwing us the lob. We're gonna dunk it. We're gonna really smear Northwestern." Now I don't know if that's their intention, but I mean they got to discover the truth, one way or the other. So maybe it's, hey, let's really start digging on this now,
But George, it might not be their fault. Like if a student athlete, like he's probably not thinking about going to the Chicago Tribune or the Chicago Sun-Times. He's thinking about just getting it out there. He's sitting in the dorm room thinking, well, how can I get this out there? Well, maybe I'll go to the school newspaper. So I don't know if the big newspapers could do anything about that. I'm not sure. They're upset, and now they're digging. I mean, they're going to have something big, I'm sure, coming out, because they're going to start interviewing people. But I don't know, like if a young kid is sitting here, and we as men, I have this discussion with my wife and my 2 daughters all the time. Us men, we don't think about the most logical things all the time. So if you're a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid that's sitting in his dorm room thinking, I'm just over this. I don't like what's happening to me. And how can I get this out there? Well, he's not thinking about going to a big city. He's just thinking about trying to move forward just a little bit. Well, how can I do that? And how can I get some attention? Well, the school newspaper. So that's probably how that worked.
Okay, I get that. And nothing you're saying here I disagree with. But what likely is happening is that the Chicago papers have somebody assigned, a beat writer, to the Northwestern beat. And my guess is that those poor people have gotten reamed out by their editors, basically saying, this bomb that went off, you were nowhere to be found. You knew nothing. How could that be? I'll guarantee you that conversation is going on at papers in and around the Chicago area. Now,
you're probably right, but also it's a slow time of year, George, that we've talked about, and a lot of colleges. My son just went back, so you never know the schedule of Northwestern. They might have been off. So this is a very slow time of year, especially when we're talking about college football and pro football. Football season has not started yet. It's about to kick up next week with the SEC Media Day. So this is a slow time of year. So maybe the beat writer, didn't go there for a couple of days, or maybe he didn't hear anything. I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating myself.
Is it just me, or this time every year, right before football season, there's a huge story that comes out?
Well, sometimes it is. Texas OU 2 years ago with Brent Zwerneman.
I feel like right around media days, maybe a little before dead period, kind of the last bit of that dead period, you get a huge story. That's what it feels like. And with Northwestern, they bit the bullet this year. It's sort of what it feels like.
Here's another thought. Okay. And admittedly, what you're getting is some of my worst cynicism in this particular segment of the show. So far, even though I can't say Pat Fitzgerald, so far, I have not seen anything that says whether Northwestern intends to honor his contract, which has several years and a bunch of $1 million left on it, or are they attempting to fire him for cause? Okay, now there was sort of a cryptic message left to ESPN last night after the All-Star hitting deal. Their live report indicated that Fitzgerald had told them that he had retained legal representation to have his rights fully honored. Okay, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what that means. Now, I'm going to play lawyer for a minute. Northwestern is likely to say, we're not paying you a damn dime. You have besmirched our school, moral clauses, all this kind of stuff. And then Fitzgerald and his attorneys are going to say, yep. And oh, by the way, the group that you hired to investigate this story, that you hired, not us, but you, is claiming that they believe Fitzgerald didn't know anything. This one is going to be really interesting in some legal whatever, because therein lies a piece of this, that the group that investigated this for Northwestern University found no tangible evidence that Pat Fitzgerald knew anything.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And George, he's got a 10-year contract that he just signed. He just finished his second year of $57 million. So there's a lot of money still out there, and you can better believe that if he didn't, I mean, he's going to get that. He's going after that. I mean, that's a lot of money. And normally when these college coaches get that, I mean, it's a guaranteed deal, whether you fire them or not. So he's there's a lot of money on the table. So it's going to be interesting to see here in the next week or so just how this thing goes.
My gut feeling now is that the president has saved his butt by coming out quickly after the student newspaper released that bombshell and said, well, on second thought, I screwed this up, and now I'm gonna move quick. The story that is out there is that whoever the anonymous whistleblower is, that the president by Sunday knew who that person was, picked up the phone, called the mom and dad first to get their side of it, then talked to the young man who is the anonymous whistleblower. And by the way, I think his name will be out there by the end of the week.
Boy, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. So supposedly, once the president heard from the parents and heard from the anonymous whistleblower, that's when he made the decision.
Obviously, some mounting evidence right there by the parents. And if the parents were upset about it, if the kids was upset about it, it's one thing. But when you talk to the parents and they just probably talk about how he calls home upset about what's going on, and then you can kind of bring a story to all that, and Michael Schill obviously listened to that, and that slap on the wrist he knew was not going to get it done. And I think you're right. I think he probably saved himself by making a quick decision, but I don't think this is near over. Can't wait to hear what the AD says about it when he gets back into town. That's going to be something. Just love to hear what he thinks about the whole situation, because he's the guy that's over the athletic department. So hadn't heard from him yet. So it'll be interesting to see all this.
So I've got to think that, when the president makes the decision, the legal team is brought in there and they all say, look, you're in the clear. You're firing him for cause. We've got all this evidence, blah, blah, blah. Did anybody in that legal team ever say to the president, before you assume you're in the clear, know that the group that you hired to investigate this has come out publicly and said they can find no tangible evidence that Pat Fitzgerald knew what was going on? That's going to be interesting.
George, it's kind of a sticky situation. It really is. I just you hate to be devil's advocate about this, but I read an article. I told you, I said on the show yesterday, I read an article about the kid was very upset. And I'm sure we don't know both sides. We don't know who's telling the truth. We're trying to figure that out. We're trying to, walk our way through the weeds of all this stuff right now. But there's a lot of things that go on nowadays. And if the kid was really vindictive, trying to get back at the coach, we've seen it before of guys saying things that's not really credible. So I'm just waiting to see all the evidence and all of what comes out. Obviously, we're wanting to hear from Pat Fitzgerald, the head coach, about what actually went on, what he actually knew. Will he tell the truth about? I don't know. It's definitely a story that is very riveting. And if what happened with those kids and what they said in that article, if that stuff did happen, they took it way too far. And if the coach knew that, he needs to be gone.
Okay, so left, as I told you, Kelly, we were going to spend a lot of time on this. So, guys, with all of these conference media days coming, would it be accurate to say that this will now be a dominant topic at all of these meetings?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
That's how it goes.
They're going to get talked about it because every team, I'm telling you, every team has some sort of hazing. Now, whether it goes to that link, I certainly hope not. I didn't have that stuff. We had some hazing at middle, but it was nothing like that. And you just knew that you were going to have to go through that kind of stuff. And when you become an upperclassman and you had it done to you when you were a freshman, you can't wait to do that kind of stuff. But those guys, if those guys took it too far. The stuff like that is just way too far. When you're undressing guys and you're making them do things like that, it's way too far, and it makes me sick. Really,
this was not singing the
your favorite song or the alma mater, right?
George, we've heard you sing your favorite song, so why don't you get up and sing it for all of us? It went a little farther than that, and if you're not certain of that, get a copy of what the student newspaper put out there, because, man, it is graphic.
And
okay.
This is another round of questions for coaches at SEC Media Days that are all going to get asked about hazing.
You know they are. So. And my guess is that right now at most of these campuses, there is some practice answers going on.
Yes.
Where the SID type and the coach are rehearsing without saying this is a recording. It'll feel like this is a recording.
There's a lot of stuff going to be thrown at these coaches too, with all this gambling stuff. They're going to have to physically set those guys down and tell them, here are the rules. Here's what you can do. We don't need to do it. Don't get caught doing that. And then they're going to have to talk about the hazing stuff because it happens.
I don't know if they're having fun, George. These coaches.
Oh, I mean,
I know you've talked about that.
They got enough problems with NIL and transfer portal, and now they're going to get to these
gambling
league meetings, and they're going to get gambling. They're going to get hazing. They're going to get. And by the way, let me just take 3 guesses here. Kelly's World of Football tomorrow probably will get more into this and what it means for Northwestern football in 2023, because it's hard to sit here and say, man, they're headed to the Rose Bowl.